A poll that was done in November 2022 by the Mental Health Foundation found that 10% of UK adults felt hopeless about their finances. However, there's such a stigma and shame around money that many people struggle to access support. Hello and welcome to the Stories That Shape Us podcast with Joanna Daniel. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and I'm talking about the connection between our money and mental health. And of course, I'm looking at the root of all of this because the research shows that the people who experience childhood trauma have insecurities around money because of low self-esteem and many other issues that might be impacting us and we don't know. And sometimes we tell ourselves that we're not coping, we're not okay, it's just us. And if we could just do something differently, it would change. But sometimes we need to understand the root of something in order for change to begin. So there are many people that is struggling with anxiety around money, especially in this post-pandemic time that we're living in. So anxiety around money shows up in many ways, in fear, in shame, in dread about our finances. It shows up in low moods and depression and depressive symptoms. And, there's this feeling of living in constant worry of not having enough. The ends are not meeting. And what does that mean for some people? And this is not simply a budgeting issue or we're bad with money, as sometimes we tell ourselves. Sometimes our money story has deep roots and is connected to traumas that we experience early in life, as I said earlier. So your money is a direct correlation to the experiences that you've had early in life, and sometimes how our parents deals with money or didn't deal with money, how we talk about money or didn't talk about money. So our experiences, it's connected. But what I want you to take away from this is this can change. Awareness is part of the one of the steps in the change cycle. We pre-contemplate change. Maybe I want to do something about it, but I don't know what to do. I don't know the steps that I need to take. That's awareness, because we have to be aware that something is wrong for us to do anything about it. So we have to be aware to start to contemplate change. So let's look at what is money anxiety and how does it show up and what can be done about it. So money anxiety is this constant ongoing worry about money, the fear about finances that might show up in many different ways, through emotional spending, through not opening letters, through not returning phone calls, through not communicating with people. It shows up in different ways. Some of the symptoms are you might have palpitations, your heart's racing, you might have trouble sleeping. And some people go into deep avoidance as I talk about. You might feel physical symptoms. You might turn up to your GP with stress-related symptoms there's nothing that's going to show up on a blood test, but it's just this chronic worry. And this is not to say chronic worry is wrong or don't worry. I just want to highlight it so you can perhaps have an understanding of the things that you're going through and why you might be experiencing this. And sometimes people with a lot might experience it, and sometimes people with not enough might experience it. Sometimes this chronic anxiety can tell us things about ourselves. It can trap us in jobs where we under earn and we're not utilizing our gifts and our talents well enough. It shows up for me in not invoicing people early enough, not chasing up invoices, not charging enough for my services. It showed up in so many ways that needed to be overcome so that I could be free, and that's why I do challenges that helps people to rewrite their money story that experienced childhood trauma, because I know the impact, the chronic way that it was affecting my life, and I'm breaking free from that, how I know that other people need to break free as well. So sometimes we want to differentiate some of the terms that I'm using, right? So sometimes we have short-term stresses around money, and then there's this chronic long-term one that feels like it's never ending, and it's a repetitive cycle in our lives, and we just feel like we cannot break free regardless of what we do. So the short term might be just an unexpected bill that comes, and there's not enough cushion to deal with this unexpected bill that comes. There are many financial advisors that says you need to save 3 times what your living expenses. Now, many people struggle to do that for many different reasons. Sometimes we struggle to do it because we're emotionally spending. And it traps us in a perpetual cycle of anxiety, and we shop to deal with the anxiety, and then we don't have enough money to cover a bill because we were emotionally spending. But if we were to deal with get help to deal with the emotions around money, we wouldn't be able to be trapped in that perpetual cycle. So there are ways to break free. And the challenge is to not allow shame to take such a hold of us that we won't talk to anybody about it, and we won't get help, because as long as we don't talk, we don't get help, and the situation's not fixed, and we're continually trapped. Or there's the chronic one, the fear of never having enough. And sometimes this fear might manifest itself daily. I don't have enough to pay the bill that just arrived. I don't have enough money to take care of something that is really important. And it can make, recreate this feeling of never getting out of this, never feeling like you're good enough. And you can hear those distortions in my conversation, like never, not good enough, feeling like we can't get out of it. And so there's these negative core beliefs that is keeping us trapped. And I'm hoping that over the course of this conversation that we're having this week around mental health and money, that you will hear things that is going to help you to break free. Okay, so we want to look at some of the ways that it commonly shows up, especially in this post-pandemic time that we're living in. Now, the cost of living has gone up. It's skyrocketed. There are things that I used to like and go to the shop and buy, and the prices are enormous now. For example, I love sun-dried tomatoes. Before the pandemic, a big jar of the sun-dried tomato that I used to buy from one of the supermarkets was £2.85. After the pandemic, that went up to nearly £4. I went to get one last week, and it's close to £5 now. Just one bottle of sun-dried tomato. And when I make different things with that, it's just 2 cups of sun-dried tomato. So it's the price is doubled. The price of many things have doubled. What we used to go to the supermarket and buy for £100, we can't do that anymore. And so if you're feeding a family, and if you have children, and there are other things to buy, and everything has gone up, our gas and our water, absolutely everything. So there's a lot of anxiety in the environment at the moment around money. And if yours feel like it's chronic, it's never ending, it could be so crippling that it might influence low moods. It might influence in thoughts of not good enough. The anxiety might set in, those anxious feelings and chronic worry. And as my audience is Christian, and you might be listening to this thinking, and we say God will provide, and he does, but there's this worry that won't go. And you might feel like you don't have enough faith, or there's something that's wrong with you, and it isn't. The underlying root of it might be connected to patterns of behavior that was learned in childhood, ways that you see your parents deal with money that you're just repeating. And if you were to have the tools to do that, you might be able to make some changes and make some differences in your life. So I want to talk about how to regulate those emotions when the bill comes that you can't pay, or somebody's chasing you for money, but you just can't afford it. You just don't have it. What do you do? Now, money sometimes represents survival for a lot of people. It was the difference between not eating and eating. The lights are on and the lights are off. The phone bill is cut off. Whatever it meant for you, it might mean survival. So we want to think about that in terms of what that feels like. That might be a feeling of perpetually in our fight or flight place, in our fight or flight response. When our nervous system is continually dysregulated, every bill is another dumping of cortisol and adrenaline and stress hormones in our body. And if you can imagine a continuous dumping of stress hormones from the bill that gets paid, the paying of the message that comes because there's a debt that is being chased, and there's the continually living in instability dysregulate the nervous system, and before we know it, we're coping with it's taking us into chronic mental health places or debilitating physical health crisis that will not show up on a blood test. And once again, the shame of that meant that we can't talk to anybody about it. I want you to know that if you experience this and if you see yourself in this in any way, that you are not alone and that you're not the only one. When we do our challenge, our Faith and Finance Rewrite Your Money Story Challenge, the stories are so similar. And if we were just to come together and talk, we would understand that we're not alone, we're not the only one, and there are ways to break out of this. That's why we create safe spaces for people to have these conversations that are meaningful. Because when we can share our shame in safe space and we're all learning and growing together, we will be able to shift, we'll be able to shift the cycle and we're able to break free, get out of survival and live from a different place. If we were just to understand these principles of regulation and attachment, regulation and, our attachment to money, what are we avoidant? Do we feel secure? Do we feel unstable or insecure about money? And if we feel insecure, how is it showing up, and how is it tripping us into places of constant worry and fear? And if we were to talk that through, the difference that would make. One of the things I know is that when I shed shame around money, it just released so many things for me. It made so many things clearer and gave me the capacity to be able to plan and to execute in a way that I couldn't before. So this is how anxiety might be showing up for you. Over checking your bank account every day, despite nothing changing, or not checking it at all. So when you're not checking in your bank account at all, you don't know how much you have. You don't know how much you have to spend. And so the avoidance creates a chronic problem and keep you trapped in anxiety and fear and worry. And as I said, dysregulate our nervous system. The feeling of shame, and that's when we tend to overspend. You might find yourself overspend because you're buying something that you feel is going to make you feel better, which it doesn't, because it recreates a cycle and a pattern of shame and guilt. As opposed to if you recognize that whenever I check my bank account or whenever a letter comes and I feel fear, locate that fear in your body. A movement helps us to get rid of stress hormones that is dumped in our bodies when we're triggered by anything that trips us in our fight or flight response. So movement, go for a walk, stretch. If you're in an anxious cycle or a stressful place about money, make sure exercise becomes a part of your lifestyle. Now, not exercise where you have to join a gym and pay more money and then you're paying out money and you're worried about money, but go for walks. It's cost effective, it's healthy, it helps us to regulate and manage our emotions, and it helps to reduce those anxious feelings. So going for a walk, talking to someone helps as well. Talking to someone helps, right? So those are some ways of regulating. But the anxiety around money might show up in boundary setting. I did a presentation last week and somebody asked a question about supporting family members, and they were struggling, but they felt they must support family members. And this fear, this cultural or family norm was really becoming crippling. So some boundaries around that might be very helpful. Fear of charging for your in your business, fear of charging what you're worth or what the value that you bring to the marketplace is worth. When we experience financial trauma, sometimes charging is an issue. We don't want to charge. We don't want to chase up invoices. I share that. We struggle to set prices that are fair for the services that you deliver. Or there's this constant hustle sometimes to prove that you're worth. And that might mean buying things that you can't afford, living like people who you do not know their circumstances, and you're living in a way that is proving that you are as valuable as them and you measure up, So it's the feeling of spending because we think it's adding something to us. And without processing our internal world, we're not going to be able to break free. And no amount of money that you spend would soothe that feeling. So we want to be able to learn how to regulate our emotions, think, talk, invite people into that space, share in a place where it's safe so we can break the cycle of chaos and insecurity and anxieties. So I want you to think about, what do you notice in your body when you're thinking about money? What do you notice in your body right now as you're listening to this conversation? Where are you feeling it? And what are some of the things that, I've just mentioned that you can do to start to regulate your emotions, to give you access to your frontal lobe so you can think differently about money? So, there's some things that you can do to begin to change the cycle now. Some practical things that you can do. So, breath work, the breathing exercises that I talked about, stretching and exercise really helps to ground us back into the present and release us from that feeling of panic when it hits. Or you can set money check-ins, like schedule that. I'm going to check my bank account once a week at this time on this day. And so that routine helps to kind of also break that cycle of panic and distress. You can identify your triggers and track them. When do they come? When do they show up? Your body will start to tell you, even when you're near the trigger, even before you start to realize that it's the date, your body will tell you. And so if you start to learn how to listen to your body, you will hear so much. So it will give you so much information. Talk to someone. If you're struggling, talk to not necessarily a financial advisor, not, some charge, and not everybody can afford to. Talk to someone who's able to, they're understanding, they're empathetic, and they're kind, and they will listen. Tell them what you need when you're talking to them. Do you need advice, or do you just want somebody to listen who is not going to judge you as you're trying to find a way to get out of the situation that you're in? And I want to say, invite God into the money conversation. He cares about every details of our life. And if you feel like you could never invite him into this conversation before because you feel like you're failing, his word says, I love what Paul says. I think it's in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. He says, when I am weak, then God is strong. And Paul said, therefore, I'm going to glory in my infirmities, that the power of God will rest upon me. That's the power that's going to help us to break free and to release and to get rid of the anxiety so that it's not becoming chronic and we're not recreating the cycle in another generation. Meditate on scripture about God's provision, not in a way that it keeps us immobile and not make us do anything, but in a way that it influences you, and that the faith that knows that I have help, and as I'm stepping out, I know that he's stepping out with me, and I know that he's going to help me and guide me. And prayer is, pray about your financial decisions, pray about the little things that you purchase and the big things that you purchase. Pray and wait. Sometimes the things that we feel like we need, we don't need them right now. And if you're praying and you think, there's this sale going on and I need this right now, pray about it, wait 24 hours before you make a purchase. Because you might be responding to a trigger versus something that you feel you really need. And the practice of journaling really helps. Journal every day about, how do I feel about money, and talk to God about how that fear has been influencing your life. I want to let you know that you're not alone. Anxiety around money is common and has become, unfortunately, more common in this post-pandemic world that we live in. But you can learn to respond to that anxiety by using some of the methods that I just shared. Understanding your money triggers, understanding how to regulate your emotions, step back from it a little, pray, and meditate on scriptures and journaling, and ask for support when you need it. If you found benefit from this conversation, please like the video so that YouTube will push it out so other people can see it, and share it with those who you think will benefit.